Mukhan? Okay. Good morning, Rabbi Say. We're smack in the middle of discussing the translation of the Torah in its various forms, and in particular the ArtScroll story. Now, I'm not really sure how to start. I can't even believe that I thought last week that we'd be able to cover it all in 1 week. Now that I realize how much it is, it really is like it's 3-4 weeks of stories. But let's try. So I want to revisit the Tzad HaOsrim, and then we'll discuss the various precedents that there is for the Matirim and how we got to where we are today. So, as follows. I think I'll start with this. Rabbi Yisroel Salanter was a radically innovative person. Everybody knows of him as the founder of the Muslim movement, that we all know of. Rabbi Yisroel Salanter, when he was, let's just say who he was. We've talked about him in the past a little bit, but he was born in a small Litvish shtetl. He was an Eloi Atzum. Rabbi Yisroel Salanter was a top-tier Eloi. He was able to hold his own in learning with anybody. All the Gedalim of his day, held him in such esteem. In his high 20s or low 30s, he moved to Vilna. And in Vilna, which was like an Ir Ve'em B'Yisrael, he started teaching Musar. Which was the first, he's an innovator, and he was mechadish many things. He was the first one to make a Chovos HaLevavos shir. Today, Chovos HaLevavos shir is ubiquitous. I'm saying there's tens of thousands of Chovos HaLevavos shirim. First person to start a Chovos HaLevavos shir was Rabbi Yisroel Salanter. He started Chovos HaLevavos shir, he started Mesilas Yesharim shir. Rabbi Yisroel started these for adults, not for yeshivalite, not for bachrim, for adults living in the town. And people looked at him a little bit crooked, a little sideways, like what is this new idea that he had? Rabbi Yisroel persevered, he continued, he did his thing. We spoke in the past, Rabbi Yisroel Salanter, when it came the cholera plague in 1836, he took on the entire rabbinic establishment of Vilna, people much, much senior to him, and he decided that the tzibur shouldn't be fasting, and maybe even himself didn't fast in Yom Kippur, and was not afraid to take on, the leading lights of Vilna, the legends of Vilna, the Gedolei HaPoskim who were in there at the time, Rabbi Tzalel HaKohen and others, etc. Rabbi Yisroel is the first one who opened the kollel. The kollel in Kovna, that was founded by Rabbi Yisroel's Talmidim and etc., and was really the model for a kollel, was Rabbi Yisroel Salanter's innovation. He decided that there needs to be a place where Yingalite, Yeshivalite, could sit and learn and be trained to be Rabbanim. They could grow into Rabbanim, which is interesting. It's not the model of kollel that we have today, but the model of training Yeshivalites so that they could grow into Rabbanim. There was some sort of matriculation process, how they would get to where they were going. Rabbi Yisroel started that. I think I even saw somewhere, I have to double check, Rabbi Yisroel might have been the first one to refer to Yungalite as Adiri Atera. I'm not even joking. I think I remember seeing it somewhere. He might have in one of his letters referred to them as Adiri Atera. Like he might be the first one who refers to full-time kollel Yungalite as Adiri Atera. Rabbi Yisroel, he was very involved in chinuch for college students. He was the first one to invent college outreach, like Hillel houses and Uchadaimer. Rabbi Yisroel himself was a college rabbi. He in 1850, when Tsar Nikolai tried to open a yeshiva for Rabbanim in Vilna, and he wanted it to be like a place where the Russian government could give its stamp of authority on the Rabbanim, and therefore essentially control them and get to impact and impart on them what they wanted. The Russian government made a very strong push that it should be Rabbi Yisroel Salanter, should be the Rashiva, the Rosh of this organization, because he was considered brilliant and well-spoken and well-balanced and also thoroughly orthodox. So they tried to reel him in. This is a big machlekes machlekes in the dais, but there are some that say that Reb Itzel of Volozhiner was leaning on Rabbi Yisroel very hard to take the position. Reb Itzel of Volozhiner felt that it was unavoidable that there was going to be such a meisid, and he thought, let it at least be someone with the stature and the standing of Rabbi Yisroel Salanter who will be able, with his wisdom, to thread the needle and keep Tsar Nikolai happy and keep Klal Yisrael happy. Rabbi Yisroel was fire against it, and in 1850 he left Vilna, and he started kind of a nomadic life. Rabbi Yisroel moved to Germany primarily, or Germany and France, and he was a college rabbi. He would go to college towns like Halberstadt and Königsberg and Berlin and Paris and etc., and he would spend a lot of time with young, highly educated men, trying to impart on them and impact them with his message. He also, through his Talmidim, changed the Litvish yeshiva system. Before anybody even knew that it needed changing, he changed it and turned them into Mussar yeshivas. And we know that was a big fight. It was not something that went easily at all. Rabbi Yisroel was a radical innovator. Rabbi Yisroel, for the last 25, 30 years of his life, did not even live in Lita, which is a crazy thing if you think about it. I think we all think of Rabbi Yisroel as like one of the Gedolei Olam HaYeshivas, one of the leading lights of the yeshiva world, Rabbi Yisroel didn't live in Lita. He lived bouncing around various German and French cities. And when asked how come he chose to spend, these, so to speak, best years of his life in these villages, in these cities, Rabbi Yisroel said as follows. He gave a mashal. I think he said it about horses, but I've seen it both ways, about trains or horses. He says when there's a runaway train speeding down a hill, only a meshugana stands in front of it trying to stop it. It's impossible. It doesn't matter how strong you are, how good you are, you're going to get ran over by the train. Once the train reaches the valley and it comes to some sort of stop, it's slowing down, then with some skill, with some sort of technique, you could try to stop it and salvage and see what's needed in this train wreck. He says, Lita, Russia, where I come from, they're bitten by the haskalah bug, they're speeding down a hill. There's nothing I could do to get in the way. All I could do is get ran over. There's no point in me staying here. Germany is already at the bottom of the hill. At the bottom of the hill, there's work to do. Once they're at the bottom and they got to where they get, now I have work to do. Now I can start impacting people and changing them and working with them and doing. So Yisroel was a fascinating innovator. Now, amongst Yisroel's innovations, he had an innovation that was unsuccessful. Yisroel had a lot of successful innovations. He had an unsuccessful innovation, and that was that Yisroel wanted to translate the entire Shas into German. He had a certain idea that he wanted to do. It's actually very reminiscent of how ArtScroll did it. He wanted to hire 30 Talmidei Chachamim Muflagim from throughout, Europe, who knew the language, who could write well, and each one would take on 100 blot, Barach, give or take. Shas is about 2,800 blot, so each one would take on, close to 100 blot. They would translate it over their tkufa. That's like a mesechta or two, depending on which type of mesechta, but it's a doable mitzvah. It's not something that's crazy. And then they would return it to Rabbi Yisroel. Rabbi Yisroel would edit it, look it over, make sure it's good, even though Rabbi Yisroel was not good at reading German. He read German, but he had a very poor German. I'll tell you how I know that. And he wanted this to happen. Now, how I know that he had a poor German is because before he decided to translate the Shas, he actually thought that we should translate Stam Svarim for college kids. That's what he wanted. There should be Svarim for college kids. And he sat down with Rav Shamshon Fal Hirsch, and they were discussing which Svarim should be chosen. And they were selecting this and that. Rav Shamshon Fal Hirsch was giving him ideas. Rav Shamshon Fal Hirsch spoke to, knew about this world. He was giving him ideas. And Rabbi Yisrael's Gabbai told Rav Shamshon Fal Hirsch, and Rabbi Yisrael sitting there, he says, really, the 19 letters that you wrote, that you, Rav Shamshon Fal Hirsch, wrote yourself, would be a very good, work to be mafetz for these type of needs. And Rabbi Yisrael said, really, I never saw it. Could I have one? And Rabbi Shamshon Fal Hirsch gave him the 19 letters in German, which is how it was written. And Rabbi Yisrael took it back, and his Gabbai, who wrote a book about him later on, his Heisbach, who wrote, they sat up all night. Rabbi Yisrael struggled to read through it. He was able to get through one letter a night, and over the next 3 weeks, Rabbi Yisrael read through Rabbi Shamshon Fal Hirsch's 19 letters, and then at the end he came back and said, this would be a very good book to have on the shelf. This itself is suitable. We just need to get it in more languages and etc. whatever. So in any case, Rabbi Yisrael, who did not speak a great German, I believe wanted to translate the Shas into German. He wanted to hire Rabbanim and do it and translate it into German. Now, Lamaisa, he wasn't able to. But it was Rabbi Yisrael's idea. Rabbi Yisrael wanted to do it. It's one of the few ideas that Rabbi Yisrael has. Now, how do we know this? Many of the different Sfarim of people who were close to Rabbi Yisrael in his lifetime bring that Rabbi Yisrael had this idea and he wanted to do it. So Rabbi Yisrael had this idea to translate the Shas. It wasn't successful, but the idea stands, meaning he wanted to do it. So now, what was Rabbi Yisrael's rationale? What changed that Rabbi Yisrael thought and said, okay, now's the right time? Or what was the product that Rabbi Yisrael wanted to put out different than maybe other products that makes it change, that makes it okay? So meaning, so there are really two tracks that we're going to go over here to explain how the Shina comes, when it was Asr and when it becomes Mutter. Meaning there's a track that discusses how the product differs. The product is a little bit different than the product that was. And there's a track that discusses Pashat like Eis Lases. The time is different. People need it. The need is more exacerbated. The need is more strong, and therefore there's more of a heter. So now, before we go into some of the Tzad Heterim, just to anchor this discussion, I quoted this tshuva briefly last week. I just wanted to quote it a little more in depth this week from the Tzitz Eliezer. It's a Shtarke tshuva. In Chelik Ydalet in Tshuva Aleph, in Ois Dalet, he says as follows. He's talking about, I told you last week, he's talking about translating Daniel from Targum into Lashon Kodesh. There was an idea to take Daniel, which is written in a very, very hard to read Targum, and turn it into Lashon Kodesh. Says the Tzitz Eliezer as follows. He says, Tzeu Lamad, Masheharishu Gedolei Haderis B'Derish Avru, Neged Eila Sheyatzu Bizmanam Lahatel Atzmam L'Targum V'Talmud Lashon Acher. Let's learn from what the Gedolei Olim from previous generations went against people who wanted to translate the Talmud. Even though a lot of the people who had these ideas were Tmimim, Yireim, Shleim, Tamid Chachamim, and thought there was nothing wrong. Where he brings as follows. And he brings in Arugas HaBoisem, Heishiv Sham Betkifes Gedoyle, Bedvarim Chaitzvim Lahaves Eish, There was a gadol who wanted to translate Ein Yaakov into German. He brings from the Tanzur Rav as follows. Here's what the Tanzur Rav said. Rav Chaim Tanzur said. It's putting on sackcloth about this idea. How could these layers of beauty that are wrapped in layer and layer of melitzas, the way the Talmud is, the way the words of Chazal are, wrapped in layers that they can mean so many levels and so many things. The main kavanah of them is the depth that's inside of it. They won't understand any of this depth, any of this wisdom, any of these layers that the Talmud, that these words have. And then he continues on. He brings the Arugis Habaysim, etc. And the Mechas Yitzchak in Chelik Daled and Shuval Lamed similarly brings the same Isser. Now, these exact collection from the Divrei Chaim and the Arugis Habaysim comes up in a tshuva, Lahedya, written about ArtScroll, one of the only tshuvas written against ArtScroll, like in its time, from the Rav of Antwerp, Belgium, Rabbi Rattenberg. He has, I think, many Einiklach in Lakewood today. Rabbi Rattenberg from Antwerp, in his tshuvas, Yad Mordechai, and he has a tshuva in Simcha Hey, where he brings as follows. He brings the Shaila Targum thing, he brings these days from Divrei Chaim and the Arugis Habaysim, and mainly he ends up saying that although to him it would seem that the halachas shebashas, the Divrei halacha that are in the Shas, is not a problem to translate into English. It's the Agada that's the problem. You can't translate Agada into another language. Agada in another language, it loses, it dissipates, it's missing everything. Agada is not meant to be understood at face value, and in a translation, all you have is face value. You don't have anything more than face value. So Agada is Zichara, so this is what he brings. Now, it's interesting, as I saw anecdotally, the way I actually came upon this tshuva was I was reading a little biography of Rav Chaim Kreisworth, whose yard set I think is tonight, actually, and he was a Rav in Antwerp also. These were Chaverim. And the story was told that they were both very against ArtScroll. Ayin in the Chuvas Yad Mordechai, where you see, the rationale explained. But then when Rav Chaim Kreisworth heard that 250 in Galaida making a parnasa from translating it, he became very pro. He said, Yidin daf machen a parnasa. So whatever that means, but that means that he obviously didn't consider it to be Azah Isser Chamber, meaning it must have been some sort of, because parnasa is great and everything, but, Isurim Chamurim, it's not mistaver that he would have thrown away. So obviously he didn't hold it was on the same. Now again, he doesn't have any chuvas anything, so I don't really know what his rationales are. But and it seems like he at some point had some sort of a snagdus. Now, what we do know from the major misnagdim, we have to share this hashi, is Rav Shach. In 1990, when the idea was first brought up to make an ArtScroll Shas, so it's Yedua, and I think this is no one denies this. Rav Shach was very against it. And Rav Shach was this close to coming out publicly against it, whether it was going to be at an event, the Yarchikala in the summer, when Rav Shach would give his public policy speeches, or whether it would be Biksav, or whatever it would be. Rav Shach was very, very close to coming out against it. Now, who exactly got, pulled Rav Shach back from the brink and got him not to come out? So there are as many versions as my fingers of this, how this happened. Probably the people who were involved is Reb Gifter, primarily, Reb Zelig Epstein was probably involved. And what's interesting is I found, and I don't know if this is common knowledge, I have a friend of mine who lived in Washington Heights, and after Shimon Schwab was nifter, he was cleaning out Shimon Schwab's office, and he found a few pages, of like letters and notes lying around. He scanned them in, and recently, a few months ago, he sent me like the PDF of all these letters. And one of those letters is a letter from Reb Schwab written to a Yid in Borough Park, who obviously asked him about the permissibility of ArtScroll. Reb Schwab writes them as follows. I should have printed it out. He says, although it is true that in its time Rav Shach was prepared to come out publicly against it, but he later changed his mind. He writes. Now I assume he means changed his mind from coming out publicly, not changed his mind about the whole idea. He later changed his mind after Reb Mordechai Gifter called him, and based on a fax that I sent him. So Rav Shimon Schwab says that he was involved in the story, sent him a fax. And they got him not to do it, and they explained to him that the American Olam, needs it. This is an Eislasis. The American Olam needs this. This is important to them, and this is something that should be allowed for the American Olam. Later on, it was translated into Hebrew as well for the Israeli Olam. And today, I looked in the Mesifta Shas. There's no haskamas even. Meaning, if you want to understand how mutter something is, meaning how much of a pashtus it is that it's okay, there's no haskamas. There's not even a conversation. There's nothing to talk about. What's the shaila? It's already a fait accompli. It's done. Meaning that's the. If you look, you see there's nothing at all. There's no talk because there's nothing left to talk about. Now, in any case, Stam, anecdotally, and I don't know if this story is true, but I heard this from a good source, that when Reb Gifter was trying to reach Rav Shach, he was afraid that maybe some people in the household would maybe not want him to get through. So he sent a fax where he said his position, that this is important, and he says, he wrote in there grammatically incorrectly, don't be meichesh shalenia lelag. It shouldn't be like we shouldn't turn out to be a joke. Meaning, he told him this is going to be a very successful product. Everybody's going to need this. It's going to take off. Shalenia lelag. Don't thing. He sent the fax, and 2 days later he sent another fax to the house, and he says, Masha shalachti igeres. A few days ago, he didn't say what it was about, and kasavti shalenia lelag ta'isi, and it should be shaletia lelag. The nusach of the letter, and his rationale was, and I don't know if this was necessary. I don't even know if this is a true story, but if it's a true story, his rationale was he was afraid the first one, which was explicit about what it was about, wouldn't get through. But the second one, which was just a follow-up letter from Rav Gifter about who knows what, would get into the pile, and Rav Shach would say, "What's he referring to? What's he talking about? I don't remember seeing anything about this." And he would ask for the old one, and he'd get this was the spiel that he played. Now again, there's many versions. Some say he sent there was different shluchim. There's many versions to the story. He actually, through the intervention of the Americana Rosh Yeshivas, what do you say? Who, Rav Gifter? In 90? In 90 still? Yeah. So I don't know exactly the years he was there when he came back, but through the intervention of the American Rosh Yeshivas, be it Rav Zelig, Rav Gifter, Rav Shimon Schwab, etc., who it is, Rav Shach was convinced not to come up publicly against it, and the project went forward and had the haskamas, the glowing haskamas, of by and large the Gedolei Rosh Yeshivas in America at the time. So now, if you look in the haskamas, a lot of them are not so clear, what the rationale is, how they're dealing with these various issues that we're discussing. But some of them are much more enlightening as to how they deal with the issues, and I want to share from those. Now, just before we actually read from the haskamas, I need to link to one more important piece of precedence. Meaning, we have from last week we have the some Sefer's possible acquiescence to translation. We have Yisroel Salanter's desire to do it, although it didn't come to fruition. And we have another very interesting episode that happened in history. I feel that it's mostly history today. Another interesting episode that happened that showed the day of many Gedolei Yisrael that probably factored in to the modern need for translation. And that's as follows. There was a sefer it's 1902, I think, in Pressburg, from two Hungarian brothers, the Zinger brothers. I think it's Yosef and Mordechai Singer. They were Einiklach with Meiser Ekach, which was a famous Rav. They were, Banshakim, Chashav Yachsanim, who came from very good families. And they put out a sefer called Sefer HaMadrich. I don't think anybody's seen it today. It's not a sefer that's common at all. Sefer HaMadrich was a one fat volume, and it was basically, they took Gemaras and Chazals that were hard to understand. They broke them down into like an easier format, meaning they would take out the hard bits and just restructure it. And then on the side, running alongside it, there was a Pirush Kal, which they wrote themselves, a Pirush Kal, all in Lashon Kodesh explaining it. And then on the side, there'd be the Ikrei HaTaisvasin, the main Taisvasin that are necessary. And what they really did is they took Shas and did mamish cut and paste, a little arts and crafts. They took a little this, a little that, and then when they felt that the sugya was too intense or getting too boring, they would throw in some Agadata. It didn't have to be the Agadata that was in the place where they were coming from. They'd put a Medrash in, or put in something from Kala Rabasi, or something from Avos Reb Nassin, just like pique your interest again, and then go weiter. And then they did it min hakal ul hakaved, meaning they took sugyas where the words were very easy, or like easy to understand, give you an easy sugya, throw in some Agadata. Then they'd give you a little bit of a harder sugya, throw in some Agadata, then a little bit of a harder, and then a lot of Agadata. And they built the whole sefer. It was basically built for beginners, for children, and for beginners, people who are not adept at learning Shas, learning Gemara. And they basically did like it was called Sefer HaMadrich, and they collected some haskamas before they put it out, and they put out the sefer. Now the Hungarian Rabbanim erupted at this. There was Kol Kaira after Kol Kaira after Kol Kaira banning the sefer, saying how terrible it is. It's everything that's wrong with translating the Torah and with weakening the Amelos and weakening the ability to learn, and meaning endless Kol Kairos. Now what these Zinger brothers did, this is interesting. I don't know of so many cases like this. They went and collected 56 haskamas from Litvish Gedolim. It seems for whatever reason that the Litvish Gedolim was very, very not opposed to this idea. Most Litvish Gedolim were not opposed to this idea. They were asking to give haskamas, and although the Hungarian Rabbanim were very against it, they collected reams and reams of haskamas from Litvish Gedolim, and very, very big names, not small names. The Aderes has a haskama, for example. Ritzka Chanan has a haskama. Reb Meir Simcha V'Dvinz has a haskama. and many, many more. Those are just some of the Gedolei Olam who have haskamas in it. And the Netziv has a haskama. And in these haskamas, you get an idea of Kilu, what the tumult is and what the rationale of allowing some sort. The Beis Halevi has a haskama in it. I don't think that would be something people think. Meaning they collected haskamas from most of the Gedolei Lita, who basically explain some sort of rationale why this is necessary b'zman hazeh, why this type of like reworking of the Shas is necessary b'zman hazeh, and allowed for it. Now I want to read a few of these haskamas, and then we'll get back to the ArtScroll story. So it's interesting is that one of the Rabbi Yitzchak Elchanan is a very short haskama. Rabbi Yitzchak Elchanan just says, he says, Yikrasim v'gam min chasam, I got your gift, Sifram hamadrich, Higiyuni l'nachin, v'hinni b'roiv toidus, l'mrachas kvay teirasi, al sher kivdeni b'svar me'ikarim, shekanu b'tchunis he calls it L'te'elas Yaldei B'nei Yisroel. You wrote this beautiful sefer for the children. It's great. It's like a Aleph Bina, a great Aleph Bina. That's what Yitzchak Elchanan calls it. Lahadricham b'mesilas ha'olev beisel, v'lahanilam ba'erich misha, miskel adasha yavoyu ha'kadosh p'nim, l'limud gefes karei l'bachuri chamed. Until they'll mature and they'll be able to learn Gemara like Bachuri Chamed when they get a little older. So the Yitzchak Elchanan writes this, and he writes this for kids. It's a good Aleph Bina. Now, what's interesting is that we have on record that Yitzchak Elchanan was against the translation of the Torah. There was an idea to translate the Shas into Russian, and Yitzchak Elchanan was very against it. Okay, I'm going to tell you this story at risk that we might have to go into a third week, but I just thought it's a good story. Yitzchak Elchanan, it's fine? It's fine. Okay. What do you say? Okay. At risk of everything taking too long, Yitzchak Elchanan was very against this project of translating into Russian. Now, that Hamtzah, whoever it was that was trying to do it, was so that the Goyim would be able to see that Shas is full of beautiful things and tifa things and smart things. And therefore, even if they see something that's shver, you don't throw out the baby with the bathwater, and they'll understand that the Shas is a very important document. Interestingly, the Yisroel, in one of his many ideas, and he was partially successful about this, wanted to have someone rewrite parts of Shas so that it could be a college course. Yisroel, who dreizich in college towns and knew what was going on, felt that if the college kids would learn Shas, Goyim even, would learn a Gemara course, they would have more respect for Yiddishkeit. Again, another idea that wasn't fully successful, although the Mishnah became a college course in Yisroel's own time, through someone who was close to him. Stam, interesting. Another innovation that's not so known about Yisroel, but Yitzchak Elchanan was very against it. Now, when they asked Yitzchak Elchanan why he was against it, he gave them a mashal. He said, I once upon a time knew two Rabbanim, he says. There was a Rav in a big city. It was a busy Rav. He was a big Talmid Chacham, he says. He was good. He was very good in learning. He didn't say any names. You could draw your own conclusions. He said he was a big Talmid Chacham, he had a good head, he was good learning. I might say he was a Rav of a big shtat, and he was busy. He didn't have time to write marachas on shver sugis. He was paskening the basic shalos, and he's a big head. He was a big Talmid Chacham, but he wasn't ligging in holding and learning. There was a little shtetl nearby him where there was a Rav who was an Eloi, a Gracie Eloi, and this guy, the Eloi in the little town, was a little fabisin and a little bored. He didn't have really who to talk to and what to do, and he would spend a lot of his time nitpicking on the Rav in the big town. What an Amoritz he is, and how he doesn't know anything, and he's just an empty suit, and then whatever. He didn't say names. He said, Vayhi Hayoim, the small town Rav came to the big city, and he wanted to be Mechabed, the Rav of the Shtat, and he sent a messenger to the Rav of the Shtat, this big Rav, and he said, I would love to come visit you. When's a good time that I could come visit you? And the Rav of the Shtat, the big city, he sent him back a message. He said, I'm ill and overwhelmed by my job, and shvach, I don't have any appointments for the next 6 months. There's nothing I could do. I would love to meet you. I kilus kabalti. I feel tremendously respected that you wanted to come visit me. I can't even, not negaya. Okay? And that kachav. He said, when the Rav from the Shtetl left, so the Talmidim of this Rav in the city, they asked him, they said, this guy has major beef with you. He talks bad about you. Why don't you sit down with him and he'll see that you're harmless, you're a Talmid Chacham, you could learn, you're a Yishamayim, he'll see that you're a regular good guy. He said, you don't understand. This guy, this other Rav, he's fabittert. He has problems with me. Bizdaval, until now, when he sits and he rants against me, he says, this guy's an empty suit, he's a nobody, he's a nothing, he's an Amaretz. And if on the small chance that someone defends me and says, did you ever meet him and talk to him? He says, I never met him. And then everyone takes what he's saying with a grain of salt. It's like, he never met me, so he doesn't like me, big deal. Now, he'll meet me. Nothing's going to change his mind. He's going to go back right where he was doing and bash me and tear me apart. And now when they tell him, did you ever meet him? He's going to say, yeah, I met him and he's a nobody. I sat with him and he's weiter a nobody. He says, I'm not going to fadin anything. I'm not going to change his mind. All I'm going to get is that now he's going to do it like on greater authority. He's going to say, now I know that he's a nobody. It's not. So Rabbi Yitzchak Elchanan said that's the same thing with translating the Shas so that the Goyim could understand that Shas is beautiful. He says, they hate you already. They think that the book is silly already. So Bizdaval, when you confront them and you say, did you ever read the Shas? It's 2,500 pages long. You ever read it? No, I never read it, but I saw excerpts. Now you're going to be able to say, yeah, I read it, I know it, I read the whole thing, and it's terrible, it's shtusim, whatever. It's just, you're not helping him, you're not fixing him. I just leave it be, leave it alone. This is Ritz Kachanan's mashal. So now, with that in mind, it does make sense that Ritz Kachanan over here in his haskama to the Madrich, he writes very clearly that he's talking about children. He sees this idea of reworking it into an easy way and translating it into Lashon Kal, writing it over into like an easy pirush and taking Rashi off the page and taking all the Taisin off the page. It's just for children. It's not something that's for adults mamish. But many of the other Gedolim who wrote about this wrote very extensively, and I want to read from Meir Simchas because Meir Simchas mamish in the Gedolei Adar, and he writes, Meir Simchas writes a fascinating thing. He writes, Kvoid ha'acham ha'ne'ovim Behem Yisbarchu Rabbim Harabanim Oisim Pri Hilulim Drushim Tevla Darshan Tevlam. It says Michtav Yadam Atar Misvarim Hayakar Hamadrich Higani. I got your letter and your books. V'samti Einai Alav Isi Ki Malachtachem Malachas Shemayim. I looked at it and I saw that you Malachas Shemayim. V'schus Avosim Mesayasam. And you have schus avos. I told you they were banchakim, they were chashav kids. It says you have schus avos of your parents. V'hein lo yipalam imenu. This is a great line. Only a litvish arav. Hein lo yipalam imenu. Ki yimtzu mekanim b'machana sheyitu b'malachtem megras. I'm not surprised that there are Kanaim who are against what you're doing. That's what Meir Simcha writes. I'm not surprised that there are Kanaim who found you as a target. Ashiyitnu b'malachtem megras. Ba'amrim kiti atari mesura lanasham ashasasamayim be'eres chafarim zarim. And they say that you're making it too accessible to people who are not b'nei Torah to understand it. Ba'amrim yikras hateyelis and imretzes ashatekiya mizel and ari b'nei Yisroel. The major mile that will come out of this to the youth of Klal Yisrael, shalekech mivcher yisayseim l'lemudei teva nemusei medina. Look who he's talking about. He says to people who are spending most of their time, it sounds like college people, who are spending most of their time learning, medicine and teva and science. Ubima'ata eis asher tishar lehem l'lemudei kodesh. In the little bit of time that they have left to learn, bal yos lam lahamik l'dalas maya mehamoin gali atalmud and afishi v'redifi maya. In the little bit of time they have left to learn, they're not able to get into the Yam Talmud to really dig into it and understand it properly how they're supposed to. And this sounds like he's describing a lawyer who's working 80 hours a week. This is very very familiar description. He says, they just turn their back on the Torah, and they'll never even get to taste the beauty of our Torah. He says, and because of this exact situation that exists, the Torah was forgotten in many parts of the areas where Klal Yisrael lives. L'chein al pi sifrim hayakar hamasoder b'oifen nois lumad alimudim asher maskimim musagei seichel anushim b'derech kal, where you used modern ways of teaching to break it in and to explain building blocks and to break it down and give it in a way that everyone could understand. V'halachas hamuchrachas v'musaris ha'toves v'keres gedolei chachamenu. You made sure to stick in the halachas that are necessary to know and the musar that's necessary to know and the stories that talk about important gedolim throughout her history. Asher metek tzuf tzvas kodesh yavim kishem ba'atzmoisam u'la'at la'at yargilu atzma b'limud ha'talmud ha'kadosh. A little bit they'll get a taste, and eventually they'll get drawn in to really learn it. Etc. They'll climb the ladder and they'll get better and better. And then he brings interesting Yerushalmi. He says, "B'yachas kazeh, Amr of Daiser of Elazar ben Azariah. Rav Daiser said of Elazar ben Azariah to Yerushalmi and Yevamis in the first parak, Makiri anishu dara siri le'ezra ve'ein of damyan l'didi." He says, "Biur l'daiti." What does that mean? Ein of damyan l'didi. His eyes are similar to mine. Ki ayin hunach ala hanacha aklolis k'mesh ayin manhegis la'adam l'chein nikras and edrin. Okay, it's a longer piece, but b'chalaifin, he writes this whole thing. Now, what's interesting is that the Beis Halevi, who maybe would be the last one you think would have Haskama, the Beis Halevi is the one who writes that this is good for Balabatim. He's not. Everyone else is writing about kids and maybe high school kids, college kids. Beis Halevi writes as follows. He says, "Rav Toiv Asul Beis Yisrael, Ashagam haBalabatim hatrudim ba'asagas parnasam." Balabatim who are busy working for their money, Gam heim biyadam litem ma'at tzari halachas, v'gan dvash midivsha shel agada umidus muslim razal. Even Balabatim who are busy learning will be able to taste a little bit of the beauty of the halachas that are in the Shas and the musar and the agada that's in there also. And that's his bracha. So he collects, and I can't go into every single one of them. There are some that are longer, and one of them from who is it? Reb Mordechai Elishberg, who is not the most well-known literature of today, but was an Adam Gadol. He writes very extensively how people lump this into the category of a Chodesh Asam and Atayra, and really there's a lot of precedence for this, and he goes and shows that there's a lot of precedence for this, and etc. Now, I think we're out of time, and we're going to hold it here. It turns out that we're going to actually do Sansino with the Rogachover's intervention, L'Toiv, L'Ra, and his Raya from Rambam, a fascinating tshuva from the Rogachover, and some of the Chashav Haskamas in the ArtScroll next week. And I hope that will be the final week of this series.
You've just experienced another Torah class brought to you by TorahAnytime.com.